The story opens on a bustling, steam-filled platform that every witch and wizard knows by heart. King's Cross Station. Platform 9 and 3/4, 19 years after the Battle of Hogwarts. The scar on Harry Potter's forehead has long since become nothing more than a faded reminder of the darkness he conquered. Yet as he stands beside his wife, Ginny Weasley Potter, watching their children prepare to board the Scarlet Hogwarts Express, the same anxious warmth and wonder flicker in his eyes that once filled them when he was a boy about to leave for Hogwarts for the first time. Their eldest, James, Sirius, is already an old hand at school, full of swagger and mischief, teasing his younger brother, Albus, Severus Potter, who stands uncertainly beside their parents, clutching his trolley handle a little too tightly. The younger boy's hair falls untidily over his round spectacles, so like his father's, but there's an air of unease around him, an inwardness, a self-doubt that separates him from his confident brother. Beside them, their sister Lily, Luna bounces impatiently, still a year too young for Hogwarts, but already longing for her own turn. Ginny, radiant and kind, but practical as ever, fusses over Albus's trunk and tries to lighten the mood, while Harry kneels beside his son, knowing exactly what trembles behind that uncertain expression. Albus has been worrying for weeks about what house the Sorting Hat will choose for him. And now the question bursts out in a half-whisper. What if I'm in Slytherin? The platform quiets for a moment inside Harry's heart as he remembers his own first journey, his fear of being different, and his first meeting with Ron and Hermione that changed everything. He tells his son softly that being sorted into Slytherin would not make him less of a Potter, that one of the bravest men he ever knew, Severus Snape, was a Slytherin, and that the hat takes your choice into account. The name Snape still feels like an echo from another life, but Harry's voice is gentle and full of respect, for he knows the legacy of courage that came even from the most unexpected hearts. Albus nods, but the comfort does not seem to take hold. Doubt still lingers as the whistle of the Hogwarts Express pierces the air. Hermione Granger, now the Minister for Magic, appears on the platform with her husband, Ron Weasley, and their daughter Rose. Hermione radiates both intellect and warmth, her bushy hair slightly tamed, but her eyes as sharp as ever. Ron, ever the joker, claps Albus on the back and jokes about sending him a toilet seat from Hogwarts. A teasing tradition inherited from the Weasley twins. The children chatter, James showing off Rose confident and curious, and Albus withdrawn, already feeling like the shadow in a family of luminaries. When the final call to board rings out, trunks are heaved, owls hoot indignantly, and goodbyes ring through the steam-filled air. Ginny hugs her sons tight. Harry's last look at Albus before he boards is a mixture of pride and worry. A father's silent hope that his child will find his own light among the ghosts of his name. The train begins to move, wheels clattering, rhythmically carrying away another generation toward destiny. Harry stands watching until the last flicker of red vanishes, the echo of steam fading like memory. As he turns away with Ginny, his thoughts darken briefly. The lightning scar, dormant for nearly 2 decades, gives a faint, unexpected twinge of pain. He touches it reflexively unsettled. The darkness that once haunted the world is gone, or so everyone believes. Yet something about that sudden pain, whispers of unfinished business, of old magic never truly at rest. Meanwhile, aboard the train, Albus sits alone in a compartment, Rose trying to coax him into meeting new students. They encounter a boy with a shock of platinum, blonde hair and pale eyes. Scorpius, Malfoy, son of Draco Malfoy. The meeting is awkward at first, weighed down by their fathers' histories. But Scorpius's awkward humor and quiet sadness disarm Albus. Rumors swirl among students that Scorpius might be the child of Voldemort. A cruel whisper that isolates him even before he steps foot in Hogwarts. Yet Albus, sensing a kindred loneliness, chooses to sit beside him, and a fragile but sincere friendship begins. Rose is scandalized. Her parents' generation still bears old scars from the Malfoy name, but Albus feels an inexplicable pull toward Scorpius's honesty and shared sense of being out of place. As the train barrels through the countryside, the two boys share sweets, stories, and insecurities, discovering they both feel like misfits, trapped by the weight of family legacies. When Hogwarts Castle comes into view, its towers silhouetted against the twilight, Albus feels both awe and dread. The sorting ceremony in the Great Hall blazes with candlelight and magic. But when his name is called and the hat touches his head, a murmur ripples through the crowd as the hat declares Slytherin. The word hangs heavy in the air, a shock to everyone, most of all Albus himself. Whispers spread instantly. A Potter in Slytherin. Harry's son lowers his head, burning with shame, while the Slytherin table hesitates before offering applause. From that moment, an invisible line is drawn between father and son, expectation and reality, light and shadow. As the feast continues, Laughter and cheer fill the hall. But Albus cannot taste the food. He feels only the tightening of the distance between himself and the world he was born into. In the flickering candlelight, Scorpius gives him a small, understanding nod across the table, and Albus manages a faint smile. Above them, cross. The enchanted ceiling mirrors the night sky, vast and full of stars. Cold, endless, and waiting for their story to begin. Back at King's Cross, long after the train has gone, Harry lingers a moment longer. Then he means to, gazing at the space where the train disappeared, feeling that old, familiar unease. The scar burns again. Faintly, but undeniably. And as he turns to Ginny, he says quietly, almost to himself, strange. My scar. It hasn't hurt in years. And though he brushes it off, deep inside, the boy, who lived, wonders if the piece he fought so hard for might be about to unravel once more. The summer days at Hogwarts fade quickly into autumn, and, with them, Albus Potter's first year begins under a cloud of uneasy expectation. The castle, magnificent and ancient, hums with enchantment as the new students learn to navigate its moving staircases, whispering portraits, and endless corridors of wonder. But for Albus, every stone feels like a reminder of how far he is from belonging. Being a Potter in Slytherin is not merely strange. It is a scandal, whispered in corridors, a curiosity that quickly turns into mockery. Even teachers glance at him with subtle confusion, as though they cannot quite reconcile the heroic name with the green, trimmed robes he now wears. Albus finds himself shrinking into the shadows, retreating from attention, his confidence slowly eroding under the weight of comparison. His cousin Rose, sorted into Gryffindor, as expected, quickly thrives, bright, social, and ambitious, while Albus struggles with spells that should come easily, his wand feeling heavy in his hand. The magic that once seemed so wondrous now feels fickle and distant, responding sluggishly to his attempts. The Slytherins, suspicious yet intrigued, regard him as an outsider. He is not one of them, but neither does he belong anywhere else. Only Scorpius Malfoy stands beside him, his quiet humor and sharp intelligence a refuge amid the whispers. Despite the persistent rumor that Scorpius is Voldemort's son, cruel fiction born of fear and gossip, Albus refuses to believe it. And in their shared sense of exile, a genuine friendship grows. The two boys become inseparable. Their companionship forged not in triumph, but in shared isolation. They study together, fail together, laugh in secret corners of the library, and whisper stories of their families, of what it feels like to live in the shadow of giants. Scorpius, brilliant yet melancholy, tells of his mother, Astoria's illness, and how she believed love could redeem even the darkest of legacies. Albus listens, moved, and begins to understand that bloodlines mean less than choices. Yet outside their friendship, the distance between Albus and his father grows ever wider. Letters from home become shorter, replies delayed. When holidays arrive, their conversations are awkward, full of pauses and polite smiles. Harry, now head of magical law enforcement at the Ministry of Magic, is busy, distracted, yet deeply troubled by his son's unhappiness. He cannot understand how Albus, of all his children, has drifted so far from him. Ginny urges him to give the boy space. But Harry's guilt festers. He feels he is failing in the one role he cannot escape, being a father. During one particularly tense evening at home, when Albus returns for summer, an argument erupts. Small at first, then cruelly sharp. Harry tries to offer him the old invisibility cloak, a family heirloom, meant as a symbol of trust. But Albus refuses it bitterly, claiming he doesn't want his father's relics or legacy. "You wish I wasn't your son?" he snaps, his voice breaking. Harry, hurt and unthinking, fires back words he will later regret. Sometimes, Albus, I wish you weren't. The silence that follows is devastating. Ginny's anger and heartbreak are palpable. But Albus has already turned away, retreating into his room with a wound deeper than any curse. The next morning, he leaves early for school without saying goodbye. Meanwhile, at the ministry, a new disturbance brews. Amos Diggory, aged and frail, arrives demanding an audience with Harry. He is accompanied by his niece, Delphi Diggory, a charming young woman with silver, blonde hair, and piercing eyes, who works at St. Oswald's home for witches and wizards. Amos begs Harry to use a recently confiscated time turner to bring back his son, Cedric, who was murdered during the True Wizard tournament years ago. Harry refuses firmly, insisting that meddling with time has been forbidden since the disaster of the Department of Mysteries. Yet, Delphi's eyes linger on Harry with an unreadable expression, and though she departs quietly, something in her demeanor hints at secrets untold. Albus, overhearing fragments of this encounter when visiting the ministry with his father for work experience, becomes obsessed with the idea. Here, at last, is a chance to right a wrong, to prove that he, not his father, can change history and make something good from it. He meets Delphi in secret, and she fans the spark of rebellion in him. Speaking of destiny and courage, when he shares the plan with Scorpius to steal the time, Turner, and save Cedric Diggory. Scorpius hesitates, terrified but loyal. The idea is reckless, dangerous, impossible. Yet Albus's conviction burns with the desperate fire of a boy seeking meaning. As the night of their plan approaches, the two boys sneak aboard the Hogwarts Express once more. This time not as wide-eyed first years, but as fugitives in the making. They hide beneath the invisibility cloak, the very gift Albus had once rejected, and whisper plans amid the clatter of the train wheel. Their friendship deepens with each shared risk, bound by trust and defiance. Scorpius worries aloud about the paradoxes of time travel, about what changing the past might unleash. But Albus insists that if they succeed, they can prove themselves to the world, to their families, to history itself. Meanwhile, Harry, haunted by strange dreams of Voldemort and shadows that twist into serpentine shapes, begins to feel an old dread stirring. The scar on his forehead burns faintly once more, as if warning him of approaching darkness. He tries to dismiss it, but even Hermione and Ginny notice his restlessness. The wizarding world believes the darkness is gone. Yet whispers begin to circulate of a black cloud rising again, of something evil stirring in the cracks of time itself. At Hogwarts, the first threads of this fate tighten around Albus and Scorpius as they prepare to leap into history's heart, unaware that their quest to fix the past will unravel the fragile piece of the present. The chapter closes on a moonlit night at St. Oswald's home, where Delphi meets the boys once more, her eyes gleaming with excitement and something darker, the stolen time. Turner glints in her palm, like a heartbeat of forbidden magic, and as the clock strikes midnight, she whispers, "Time doesn't belong to them. It belongs to us." With that, the impossible begins. A ripple across history, a spark that will test friendship, family, and fate itself. In that instant, Albus Potter, driven by love and longing, steps beyond the line his father once swore never to cross, and the world, silent and vast, begins to shift. The echo of the Hogwarts Express faded into the distance. But for Albus Potter, its rhythm lingered like a restless heartbeat, pulsing with doubt, expectation, and something that felt dangerously close to shame. The castle, towering in the mist, should have been a symbol of wonder. Yet to Albus it loomed like a challenge. Every turret and stone, whispering the legacy of his father, the boy who lived, the legend whose name he could never escape. As he stepped into the great hall for his first feast, surrounded by enchanted candles and floating starlight. His nerves twisted tighter than ever. The Sorting Hat's voice, ancient and knowing, had hardly touched his head before it made the decision that would define him. Slytherin. The word sliced through the hall, met with stunned silence and scattered whispers. Potter and Slytherin. Albus could feel eyes burning into him from every table, even the teacher's dais. He walked, stiff and hollow, toward the green banners and silver serpents, aware of the stares that followed him. Only one boy, with pale hair and uncertain eyes, gave him a small, awkward smile. Scorpius Malfoy, son of Draco. The two sat side by side, misfits united by legacy, though neither yet knew how deeply their friendship would root itself in the cracks of history. Days turned to weeks, and while others settled into rhythm, Albus found only friction. His spells fizzled. His broom wobbled. His classmates snickered. Being the son of Harry Potter meant expectations he couldn't fulfill, and whispers he couldn't silence. They muttered, not even close. Even teachers seemed unsure whether to admire or pity him. Letters from home arrived weekly, Ginny's cheerful words unable to pierce the gloom that settled over him. Harry's notes full of well-meaning advice that felt more like reminders of what he wasn't. The distance between father and son grew not from anger, but from silence. A silence filled with all the things neither dared. Albus's only refuge was Scorpius, whose gentle humor and brilliant mind offered light in the dark corners of Slytherin House. Scorpius carried a burden too. The cruel rumor that he was the secret son of Voldemort, born from darkness itself. Students avoided him, mocked him, and yet he bore it with grace, deflecting cruelty with wit. Albus saw in him the reflection of his own isolation, and in their shared loneliness, they found belonging. They spent hours hidden away in the library's forgotten corners, whispering about everything. Their parents, their fears, the strangeness of living in the shadow of names too heavy to carry. Scorpius spoke of his mother, Astoria, who had died when he was small, leaving him only her belief that love was stronger than blood. Albus, in turn, confessed how he sometimes wished his father weren't famous, that the world didn't measure him against someone who had already saved it. Their friendship became their lifeline, a rebellion against expectation, a sanctuary from the world's gaze. Yet the world outside, their bond continued to turn. In the Ministry of Magic, Harry Potter now held a powerful post as head of magical law enforcement. But though his victories were many, peace did not bring him rest. His scar had begun to ache faintly. For the first time in 19 years, and his dreams were filled with serpents, smoke, and the echo of an ancient voice. When he woke, sweating in the dark, Ginny would press his hand and tell him it was only the past haunting him. But Harry knew old magic never truly slept. One morning, as autumn leaves scattered through the ministry's glass atrium, an old man approached his office. Amos Diggory, frail and bitter, leaning on a cane. Behind him stood a young woman with silver, blonde hair and intense, gray eyes. Delphi, his niece. She said softly, her smile both kind and unreadable. Amos demanded that Harry use a recently discovered time Turner, a relic confiscated from dark wizards, to go back and save his son, Cedric, from dying during the True Wizard tournament. Harry refused, his voice steady but pained. Time travel nearly destroyed us once, he said. Changing the past never ends. Well. Amos's voice cracked with grief and fury, accusing Harry of selfishness, of forgetting what it meant to lose a child. When he left, Delphi lingered, her gaze locking on Harry's with unsettling calm, as though memorizing him. That night, Albus overheard the conversation between his father and the Diggorys. The words, Turner and save Cedric, lodging in his mind, like sparks on dry grass. It became an idea that consumed him. If his father would not right the wrongs of the past, perhaps he could. Perhaps he could prove that he was not just the son of a hero, but a hero himself. When he told Scorpius of his plan to steal the time Turner and change history, Scorpius's first reaction was disbelief, then fear. Albus, time magic is dangerous, deadly dangerous, he warned, recalling the stories of paradoxes and lost souls. But Albus's conviction was fierce, almost desperate. If we bring Cedric back, my father will have to see I'm not a disappointment, he said. Scorpius hesitated, torn between reason and loyalty, but in the end, friendship won. He agreed to help. The boys sought out Delphi, who encouraged them with whispers of destiny and courage, her silver eyes gleaming with excitement. Beneath her charm, there was something sharp, something that flickered too quickly to name. On the eve of the new term, they put their plan in motion. Using Harry's old invisibility cloak, the gift Albus had once spurned, they crept aboard the Hogwarts Express, hiding in the shadows between carriages, as rain lashed the windows, and the train thundered toward the horizon. Scorpius clutched the map Delphi had given them. Albus clutched his fear. We can fix everything, Albus whispered. "We can make it right." Scorpius nodded, though uncertainty clouded his eyes. Meanwhile, back at the ministry, Harry's unease deepened. His dreams grew darker, a black mist curling around him, a voice whispering of the son who will betray the father. The scar burned again, sharper this time, and though he said nothing to Ginny, dread coiled in his gut. Something was coming. The next morning, the train reached its destination, but Albus and Scorpius were gone, vanished into the world, beyond the tracks. Delphi waited for them in the shadows of Sati, Oswald's home for witches and wizards. The time, Turner glinting in her palm, a tiny device of bronze and danger. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice low and thrilling. "Ready to rewrite history." Albus hesitated, then nodded. "Let's save Cedric Diggory," he said, unaware that with those words he was about to unmake everything he had ever known. Delphi smiled, and the golden gears of time began to turn, slow and terrible. The night, air shimmered around them as magic bent and history trembled. And far away, Harry Potter woke with a start, clutching his scar, knowing without knowing why, that his son was in terrible danger, and the past had just come alive again. The night cracked open, with a shimmer of gold as the stolen time. Turner spun wildly in Delphi's trembling hand. It's delicate, gears flashing like the heartbeat of the universe. And in that suspended moment between now and then, Albus Potter and Scorpius Malfoy were hurled backward through the folds of time, their bodies twisting, their screams swallowed by magic that felt both infinite and suffocating. The world dissolved into fragments. Faces, places, echoes of laughter and pain. And when the spinning stopped, they were no longer in the world they knew. The air was colder, sharper, the colors slightly wrong, as though history itself breathed differently. They stood in a dense forest under a heavy moon, the silence broken only by the distant hum of the Triwizard Tournament's second task. Delphi, her silver, blonde hair glowing faintly in the moonlight, smiled with exhilaration, her eyes gleaming like polished steel. "We're here," she whispered, almost reverently. "This is the day Cedric Diggory dies." Albus's heart pounded, not with fear, but with hope, with the naive certainty of a boy desperate to prove his worth. The plan was simple in theory, impossibly dangerous in practice. Interfere just enough to keep Cedric from being humiliated in the task, to change the path that led him to the graveyard, where Voldemort returned. Scorpius's hands shook as he adjusted his robes, his breath misting in the air. "Albus," he whispered. This is madness. What if we get caught? What if we make things worse? But Albus was already moving, crouching low. His father's invisibility cloak draped around them. They crept closer to the lake, where magical creatures shimmered beneath the surface, where champions battled to rescue their loved ones from its enchanted depths. They watched Cedric, proud, determined, radiant with courage. And in that moment, Albus understood why his father had admired the boy who never came home. He doesn't deserve to die, Albus murmured. Delphi's smile widened. Then make sure he doesn't. At her urging, they cast a simple jinx, one meant to delay him, just long enough to alter fate's path. But the spell struck harder than intended. Cedric stumbled, confusion flashing across his face as he lost precious time. They fled into the shadows, hearts racing, believing they had saved him. The time Turner glowed again, dragging them violently forward. The world blurred, the air screamed, and when they landed, gasping, they were back at Hogwarts. But something was wrong. The castle seemed colder, sterner. Its banners strange. Students passed them with unfamiliar faces and suspicious glances. Albus's robes had changed. The Slytherin green replaced by bright red and gold. Scorpius blinked, bewildered, as he realized his friend now wore the colors of Gryffindor. We did it? Albus cried. What changed it? But Scorpius, scanning the hall, felt a chill of dread. Something was different, fundamentally different. As they hurried to the great hall, they saw familiar faces, twisted by unfamiliar lives. Hermione was no longer minister for magic, but a stern defense against the dark arts professor. Ron, no longer her husband, seemed older, lonelier, still running Weasleys, Wizard Wheezes, and Rose, their friend who once ignored them, did not exist. When Albus tried to find her in the crowd, there was no trace. The realization struck with quiet horror. Every change rippled outward, rewriting lives, erasing people. Scorpius, panicked, begged to reverse it, to fix what they'd broken. But Delphi had vanished without a trace. Funace, her promises, echoing like laughter in an empty hall. Forced to continue pretending, Albus found himself trapped in a world that seemed brighter but emptier. One in which his own mother and father looked at him with confusion rather than love. At the ministry, Harry felt it, not consciously, but deep in his bones, the way magic hums when something sacred is disturbed. His scar burned again, sharper. Now and in the night he dreamed of whispers, of a dark shape, rising from the grave of time, calling his name. He confided in Ginny and Hermione, who tried to reassure him. But even Hermione's rational mind could not dismiss the flickers of impossible magic appearing across the wizarding world. In this altered timeline, small things were broken. Prophecies out of order, spells misfiring, ghosts restless in their portraits. Meanwhile, Scorpius scoured the Hogwarts library for answers, terrified by what they had unleashed. He found records that chilled his blood. The Triwizard Tournament had ended differently. Cedric, humiliated by failure, had turned cruel, eventually joining the Death Eaters. The world they had created was worse, not better. Voldemort had won. Dumbledore had never returned. Harry Potter had died at the Battle of Hogwarts, and darkness reigned. Scorpius, trembling, realized he was alone. Because in this new reality, Albus Potter had never been born. The shock was too great. He stumbled through corridors that were now patrolled by students wearing black armbands, marked with a serpent and lightning, bolt intertwined. The insignia of the Augury Empire. The new Dark Order. Professor Snape lived in this timeline, a ghost of his former self, leading secret, resistant cells in Dumbledore's name. It was Snape who found Scorpius and, through quiet defiance, helped him understand that the only way to undo the damage was to return the world to its original course. With the help of an older, battle-hardened Hermione and Ron, rebels hiding in the shadows of a conquered Hogwarts, Scorpius used the time turner once more, his heart breaking as he watched them die fighting to protect him. He spun time back to the moment before they first interfered, and the world shuddered back into place. When he found Albus again, everything was as it had been, and their friendship intact, the world restored. Though both of them older now in spirit, haunted by what they had seen. The two boys swore never to touch time again. Yet their bond had deepened beyond friendship. It was forged by shared guilt and impossible wonder. Harry, sensing something he could not name, confronted Albus in the night. And though the boy could not speak the full truth, his tears said enough. For the first time in years, Harry held his son not as a symbol, but as a child, flawed, frightened, and loved. Whatever you are, wherever you are sorted, you'll always be enough, he whispered. Yet beyond the warmth of that reconciliation, Delphi watched from the shadows, her smile sharper than ever, her purpose only just beginning. She had lost the time turner, but not her faith in destiny. The past, she murmured to herself, was only the beginning. And as the moon rose over Hogwarts, silver and silent, the faint outline of a black, winged bird. The augury appeared in the mist, foretelling that time itself was not done unraveling. Ink. Dawn spilled pale gold across the spires of Hogwarts, washing away the shadows of nightmares. But for Albus, Potter, and Scorpius Malfoy, morning brought no peace. Only the heavy realization that the ripples of time they had stirred had not yet settled. Though the world appeared restored to what it once was. Familiar halls, familiar laughter echoing off stone walls. The two boys could feel a faint, uneasy hum beneath the surface, as if the past still whispered through the cracks of the present. The time Turner was gone, or so they believed. Shattered in Scorpius's trembling hands during their desperate attempt to return the timeline to normal. But Delphi Diggory, or whatever name she truly claimed, had not vanished into history's dust as they had hoped. In secret, she hunted the remnants of time, magic, her obsession, growing into something more dangerous than they could imagine. At the Ministry of Magic, Harry's nightmares deepened. He saw flashes of a black-haired girl with silver eyes, always standing beside a figure cloaked in shadow, whispering words he couldn't remember upon waking. His scar, dormant for 2 decades, seared with new pain. Ginny tried to comfort him, but Harry's instincts, honed through years of war, told him this pain was not a dream. Something dark had slipped back into the world. When he sought counsel from Hermione, now again the steady and brilliant Minister for Magic, she confirmed troubling reports. Faint traces of temporal magic detected near the ruins of Godric's. Hollow, strange disturbances in magical signatures, and a theft from the Department of Mysteries. The blueprint for the destroyed time, Turner. Someone was rebuilding it. Meanwhile, Albus, trying to repair his relationship with his father, found himself caught between guilt and silence. He wanted to tell Harry everything. The journey through time. The dark world they had created. Delphi's lies. But fear of punishment and disbelief held his tongue. Instead, he buried himself in studies. Spent long evenings wandering the castle with Scorpius. Their friendship, now deeper, gentler, scared by the weight of shared secrets. One night, as snow began to fall, they found themselves in the Ollery, gazing at the pale moon. "We fixed it, didn't we?" Albus asked softly. Scorpius hesitated, then answered. "Fixed most of it." The wind howled through the stone arches, carrying the unspoken truth. That history, once touched, never fully heals. Days later, a mysterious letter arrived for Albus, delivered by an unfamiliar, all whose feathers shimmered faintly silver. The parchment was sealed with a broken crest, a serpent entwined with wings. And inside, the handwriting was elegant, deliberate. The past is never over, Albus Potter. Meet me where heroes fell, and I will show you the truth of who I am. Delphi's name was not written, but her presence bled through every word. Albus, shaken, showed it to Scorpius, who begged him to destroy it. She lied to us, Albus. She used us. But Albus could not resist the pull of unfinished business. Against all reason, the two boys decided to go. Not out of trust, but to end what they had begun. Cross, they traveled under the invisibility cloak once more, sneaking out of the castle, hearts pounding, with both fear and determination. Their destination, the old graveyard of Godric's Hollow, where so much had begun and ended. There, among the weathered stones and whispering yews, Delphi waited, her cloak rippling like ink in moonlight, her expression calm yet hungry. "Up. I knew you'd come," she said, her voice low, coaxing. "You both were part of destiny's design." Albus stepped forward, anger and sorrow twisting in his chest. "You tricked us," he said. "You used Cedric's name, my father's pain." But Delphi raised her hand, silencing him with a spell that rippled the air. "I used what I needed," she said, "because I am not who you think I am." And then, as she drew closer, the moonlight revealed the mark on her arm. A faint serpent, like tattoo that shimmered and moved like something alive. "I am Delphi," she whispered, "daughter of Lord Voldemort and Bellatrix Lestrange, conceived in darkness, hidden by time, raised to fulfill the promise that he could not." The words struck like lightning. Albus stumbled back. Scorpius froze, horror flooding his face. Delphi's eyes gleamed, silver and merciless. "You freed me from history's chains, Albus. You opened the cracks in time. Now through them, he will rise again." She produced a second time, Turner. Smaller, more refined, its surface carved with runes that shimmered with forbidden magic. "This one is perfect," she said softly. "No limits. No return." With a flick of her wand, she disarmed them both and vanished in a burst of blue light, leaving only a scorch mark on the ground where she had stood. Panic drove Albus and Scorpius back to Hogwarts, where they confessed everything to Professor McGonagall, who listened in silence, her face grave and pale. The news spread quickly to Harry, Hermione, and Draco, who convened in the headmistress's office under the watchful gaze of Dumbledore's portrait. For the first time in years, the old fear returned. The sense that darkness, cunning and patient, had found a way to live again. Draco's face was drawn, his voice low, as he admitted that his family's vault once contained magical prototypes capable of altering time itself. If she truly has one, he said, she can do more than change history. She can erase it. Together, they searched for Delphi's trail, but she was always one step ahead. Every lead turned to smoke. Every trace vanished, as if time itself protected her. Meanwhile, Albus and Scorpius discovered an ancient prophecy buried in the restricted section. One that spoke of the augury, child of grief and flight, who shall return the unseen Lord to life through the tears of his own bloodline. Delphi's goal was clear, not just to bring Voldemort back, but to alter the final battle, to make him win. That revelation brought fear to every heart, but also resolve. Harry, haunted by dreams of his past self confronting Voldemort, began to see flashes of Delphi in those memories, as if she were already reaching backward. Guided by Dumbledore's portrait, he realized that to stop her, he would have to go where he never wished to return. Back to the night his parents died. As preparations began, Harry and Albus faced each other in silence, years of tension finally breaking into raw understanding. "You don't have to prove yourself to me," Harry said quietly. "You're already everything I could never be. Free to choose your own path." Albus's voice trembled. "And you don't have to be perfect, Dad. You just have to be here." In that fragile moment of reconciliation, father and son embraced, knowing that their bond, though tested by time, guilt, and magic, was the only constant strong enough to face what was coming. Outside, the winter wind howled through the castle towers, carrying the faint, distant cry of a bird, an augury, a sound like mourning or prophecy. And somewhere beyond time's veil, Delphi turned the time. Turn her once more, whispering, "Let him live." The gears spun, the air fractured, and history began to bleed. The world trembled on the edge of two destinies, as Delphi turned the perfect time. Turner, her pale hands glowing with its golden light, and, with a single whispered incantation, she and time itself vanished into the rippling dark. For Albus, Potter and Scorpius, Malfoy, left behind in the aftermath of her disappearance, the air still hummed with the aftertaste of magic so ancient it seemed alive. They knew, with a cold certainty that froze the breath in their lungs, that Delphi had gone back to the moment that began everything. The night of October 31st, 1980. 1. When Lord Voldemort murdered Harry Potter's parents in Godric's Hollow. Somewhere. Sometime. She was already bending the past, reshaping it like molten glass to fit her twisted desire. The revelation struck the adults like a thunderclap in the headmistress's office, under the watchful gaze of Dumbledore's portrait. Harry, Hermione, Ginny, Draco, and McGonagall gathered, the candlelight flickering over faces drawn with dread and determination. Hermione spread out the fragments of the prophecy Albus and Scorpius had found. Born to darkness and flight, she shall unmake the night. Dumbledore's portrait, usually serene, now looked almost sorrowful. Time, he murmured, is not a force to be conquered, only endured. But she believes herself destiny's heir. Draco, his jaw set, produced something none expected. A small, obsidian box, long hidden in the Malfoy vaults. Inside gleamed another time. Turner. One crafted in secret by his father, Lucius, out of both pride and fear. A device meant to outlast death itself. Draco said quietly, "Is our only chance to follow her." The room fell into tense silence as Harry took the device, the weight of history heavy in his palm. Ginny gripped his arm, fear flickering behind her. Steady gaze. "If you go back there," she whispered, "you'll see them. Your parents." Harry's voice, rough with emotion, replied, "I know. But I can't let their deaths be undone." Albus stepped forward, his face pale, but resolute. "You're not going without me." Harry looked at him, torn between fear and pride. "You don't understand what's at stake." "I do." Albus interrupted. "Because she's my mistake too." In the end, Harry knew there was no stopping his son. Not this time. And so, joined by Scorpius and Draco, the four of them prepared to chase a ghost through time. As the ancient device spun gold light, flooding the office, the air twisted, the walls blurred, and the present melted away like ink in water. They landed in a quiet, moonlit village. Godric's Hollow. Its cobblestone streets bathed in silver. Its cottages, sleeping under the weight of innocence that did not know it was about to end. From behind a hedgerow, Harry saw the faint glow of a small house at the end of the lane. His house. He froze, breath caught in his chest. His heart an impossible mix of awe and agony. Inside that cottage lived a young man and woman who bore his face and his mother's eyes, laughing softly over their baby boy, unaware that death walked toward their door. Albus clutched his father's sleeve, trembling. "That's you." Harry's eyes burned as he whispered, "That's him." He wanted to run, to warn them. But time was a glass wall between them. One touch could shatter everything. Delphi was already there, cloaked in darkness. Her silhouette, barely visible near the tree line, watching the house with reverence and fury. He was meant to win. She murmured to herself, voice carried by the wind. He was meant to rule. As they watched, Delphi raised her wand toward the house. Her intent clear: to stop Voldemort from casting the curse that rebounded, to twist the moment so the Dark Lord lived and Harry Potter died. Albus's breath caught. "We have to stop her now." But Hermione's warnings echoed in Harry's mind. Do not be seen. Do not be known. Time, fragile as spun glass, could shatter under even a whisper of interference. They had to act with precision. Scorpius, the thinker, whispered a plan. Distract her without revealing themselves. Break her focus long enough to stop the spell. Harry nodded, transfigured his cloak into a decoy figure, a phantom of light and motion, and sent it drifting toward Delphi. She turned sharply, eyes flashing silver, recognizing the trap too late. "Potter!" She screamed, fury distorting her face. Her curse exploded through the air, lighting the night with blue fire. The illusion shattered, and chaos erupted. Spells streaked across the village, shattering trees and burning the air. Delphi moved with terrifying grace, her magic fluid, precise, a fusion of her mother's ferocity and her father's power. Harry faced her head on his wand, steady though his hands shook with the unbearable weight of memory. "You don't have to do this," he called out. "You're not him," she laughed, a sound sharp as breaking glass. "I am his blood, his heir, his future. You are the mistake that should never have survived." Their duel ignited the sky. Curses and counter-curses, colliding in explosions of light that echoed across decades. Albus and Scorpius, darting through the shadows, worked frantically to trap her, using spells they'd learned, and others they'd only dared imagine. Draco fought beside his son, pride and love shining through every spell he cast. For one brief, heart-stopping instant, Delphi's curse missed Harry and struck the very wall of the Potter home, where young James and Lily laughed softly within. The sound froze, Harry in place, horror and longing crashing through him. He could see, through the veil of time, his parents' faces, alive, radiant, unaware. Tears blurred his vision, but in that moment of distraction, Delphi lunged forward, seizing the time. Turner and shouting, "Let him live!" The world convulsed. Time fractured again, golden light shattering into threads, Harry reached for her, his fingers brushing the device, just as it spun. And then all was still. They found themselves back in the churchyard of Godric's Hollow, dawn breaking. The house stood as it always had in memory. Ruined, silent, eternal. Delphi lay on the ground, bound in silver chains, conjured by Albus and Scorpius. Her eyes filled not with rage now, but a hollow grief. "He was my father," she whispered, tears streaking her pale face. "I only wanted to know him." Harry knelt beside her, his voice soft, almost kind. "He could never love the way you wanted him to. But you can still choose who you are." For a moment, Delphi looked at him. Truly looked. And then closed her eyes, letting the chains tighten. The Ministry would take her to Azkaban, her magic bound, her dreams broken. But as she was led away, she whispered one last thing. Time never forgets. In the silence that followed, Harry stood, with Albus beside the ruins of his old home. Through the broken doorway, he could see the faint outline of a crib, a flash of red hair, a trace of laughter long gone. Albus took his father's hand, grounding him in the present. "You saved them," he said. Harry shook his head slowly. "No. They saved me. Then and now." Together they turned toward the rising sun. The past finally laid to rest. The future opened like a blank page. Above them, a single golden feather drifted down. The mark of the augury. Fading in the morning light, a reminder that even when time is mended, its echoes remain forever. The air, in Godric's Hollow, shimmered with the dawn of a new beginning. But beneath its peace lingered the weight of all that had been changed and nearly lost, as the Ministry's oars escorted Delphi away in enchanted chains that glowed faintly with containment runes. Harry, Albus, and Scorpius watched in silence, each of them carrying the ghost of what they had witnessed. The face of history, almost rewritten. The time? Turner, broken again by Harry's final spell, lay buried under the frost. Lay soil, its gears frozen mid-spin, the last link to a past that refused to die. Yet even as they stood together, the echoes of time still whispered faintly in their ears, fragments of moments that had tried to reshape themselves. Visions of futures that might have been. For Albus, it was the haunting image of Delphi's sorrow, her longing not for power, but for belonging. For Harry, it was the sound of his parents' laughter on the night they never lived to see. As they returned to the present, stepping through the shifting veil of time, they found themselves once more in the headmistress's office at Hogwarts, where Professor McGonagall, Hermione, Ginny, and Draco awaited them with expressions caught between fear and relief. Hermione exhaled deeply, her composure breaking for the first time in years. "It's over?" she asked. Harry nodded slowly. "For now. She's gone. But time." His voice faltered as he looked down at his hands, still trembling. "Time has a way of remembering." McGonagall, ever the pillar of poise, placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. "And yet, Mr. Potter, it seems even time respects a father's courage." Ginny, her eyes wet, crossed the room and embraced both Harry and Albus at once, whispering, "No more secrets. No more distance." In that moment, for the first time since Albus had set foot at Hogwarts, they felt truly like family. Scarred, but whole. Draco watched them quietly, his usual restraint softened by gratitude. When Scorpius joined him, grinning sheepishly, Draco rested a rare hand on his son's shoulder. "You did well," he said simply, and though his voice was low, Scorpius beamed, as though his father had spoken 1,000 words. Hermione, ever the strategist, began sealing away all remaining knowledge of the time Turners, ordering the Department of Mysteries to destroy every schematic and charm related to temporal magic. "We tampered with the laws of nature long enough," she declared. "It's time we learn from our mistakes." But Dumbledore's portrait, watching silently from its gilded frame, spoke with the gravity of centuries. "It is not the device that tempts man, but the memory of loss. As long as hearts grieve, time will always be the forbidden door they wish to open." His words sank into the room like a benediction and a warning. Days passed, and life at Hogwarts slowly found its rhythm again. Winter melted into the first soft blush of spring, bringing laughter back to the great hall and warmth to the once cold corridors. Albus and Scorpius, though changed by all they had endured, found a peace they hadn't known before. They no longer hid in the shadows of their fathers' names, but walked the castle grounds as their own kind of heroes. Quiet, imperfect, but brave. Their friendship, tested through time and tragedy, had become something rare and unbreakable. One afternoon, as they sat by the Black Lake, watching the sunlight ripple across the water, Albus said, "It's strange. After everything, I don't feel like I went back in time. I feel like time came forward to meet me." Scorpius smiled faintly. "Maybe that's what growing up is? Learning to stop trying to fix the past and start living in the now." Behind them, the castle stood tall and eternal, its towers crowned with the cries of owls and the laughter of students. And yet, deep within the forbidden forest, where magic ancient as the earth itself breathed through the roots. Something stirred. A shimmer of golden light, faint but real, pulsing from the ground like a heartbeat. The shards of the shattered time, Turner, thought to be buried forever, began to hum softly, the runes etched upon them flickering with life. Magic, it seemed, never died. It only waited to be remembered. Back in London, at number 12, Grimoire Place, Harry sat alone in his study late one night, the room lit only by the faint glow of the fire. Before him lay an old photograph. His parents, smiling, holding baby Harry. He traced their faces with his fingertips, then looked toward the framed picture beside it. His own family, Ginny, and the children, their eyes full of love and mischief. The scar on his forehead tingled faintly, not with pain, but with memory. He whispered into the quiet, "Thank you, Mum. Thank you, Dad." From the shadows of the room, a soft rustle. Perhaps only the settling of air, or perhaps something more, brushed past his ear like a blessing. Upstairs, Ginny stirred in her sleep and murmured his name. And Harry smiled, feeling for the first time in years that the ghosts of his past had finally found peace. At Hogwarts, Albus and Scorpius stood on the astronomy tower, watching the stars bloom across the night sky. "Do you ever think," Albus said, "that time isn't just moments stacked in a line? That it's alive, like the sky?" Scorpius tilted his head. "If it is, then maybe we're not meant to control it. Maybe we're meant to listen." The stars above seemed to pulse in agreement, ancient and eternal. Far below, the great hall glowed with the golden warmth of dinner laughter, echoing through its stone walls. And for once, there were no curses, no secrets, no fear. Only the living heartbeat of a world that had almost been rewritten. Yet somewhere beyond mortal reach, in the depths of time itself, a faint, ghostly ripple spread outward. Not of danger, but of remembrance. Delphi's tears had fallen upon the earth before her imprisonment, and where they touched, the threads of time shimmered, weaving a quiet promise that even darkness born of sorrow could one day be redeemed. In the days that followed, rumors spread of strange dreams among witches and wizards, of a silver flying through starlight, its cry neither mournful nor menacing but full of peace. Some said it was the augury reborn, no longer a herald of death, but a symbol of hope. Others believed it was simply the world healing itself after too many wounds. For Harry and Albus, for Draco and Scorpius, it didn't matter which was true. They had faced the past and chosen the future. They had learned that destiny is not something written. It is something lived. And as dawn rose once more over Hogwarts, painting the sky in colors of rebirth, Harry's voice echoed softly in Albus's mind. Words once spoken by another mentor long ago. Happiness can be found even in the darkest of times, if one only remembers to turn on the light. At last was still, and in its stillness, life began anew. The morning air over Hogwarts shimmered with a quiet brilliance. The castle bathed in soft light that seemed to bless its ancient stones with renewal. Yet, beneath the calm, something unseen stirred. Not a threat, but a whisper. The faint murmur of time remembering its scars. Weeks had passed since Delphi's defeat, and though the wizarding world had returned to its daily rhythm of laughter, lessons, and letters carried by owls, the hearts of those who had faced her carried the residue of destiny's touch. Albus Potter awoke that morning with a strange sense of clarity, as if a curtain had been lifted from his mind. For the first time, he did not feel the weight of his father's name pressing on his chest. Instead, he felt a lightness, a quiet pride that was wholly his own. The sun spilled across his bed in golden waves, and for a fleeting moment, he thought he heard a faint rustle, like the wings of a bird, brushing past his window. Down in the great hall, the chatter of students swirled like music. Gryffindors and Slytherins, once divided by legacy, now mingled more freely than Albus had ever seen. It was as if the old house rivalries had been softened by the echoes of shared danger, as though everyone, without knowing why, sensed that something in time itself had tested them and found them worthy. Scorpius Malfoy sat waiting at their usual spot, a mischievous grin already playing on his lips. "You're late," he said as Albus sat down beside him. "Late for what?" Albus asked, reaching for toast. "Late for destiny, obviously," Scorpius replied dramatically, earning a laugh that made Albus choke on pumpkin juice. Their laughter caught the attention of Rose Granger Weasley, who passed by with her usual air of determined intelligence. She gave them a look that was equal parts curiosity and reluctant affection. "Whatever mischief you two are planning," she said, "try not to destroy space and time again. All right?" Scorpius grinned. "We'll do our best, though no promises." For a moment, it was as if everything that had once been fractured was mending itself naturally. Friendship, houses, family. But deep down, Albus still felt the pull of something unresolved. A faint hum of energy, as if the threads of time were still gently vibrating from their journey. That afternoon, he and Scorpius ventured down to the edge of the forbidden forest, where the light dappled through the trees in shifting gold and green. There, half buried in the moss, lay a small shard of bronze, a fragment of the shattered time turner. It pulsed faintly, warm to the touch, like a heartbeat. Scorpius crouched beside it, eyes wide. "Do you think it's dangerous?" Albus shook his head slowly. "I think it's a reminder." They buried it together, beneath the roots of an ancient oak, whispering a simple spell of concealment. Not to hide it from the world, but to let the forest guard it, as it had guarded countless secrets before. Above them, carried a faint cry. The call of a bird neither had seen, but both recognized in their bones. The augury. Only this time, its song was not one of mourning but of calm. Back at the castle, life continued its steady rhythm. Exams approached, and McGonagall's voice echoed through the corridors with stern reminders about study, schedules, and curfews. Hermione visited Hogwarts to give a guest lecture on magical ethics and the dangers of temporal manipulation. Her speech, both brilliant and terrifying enough to ensure that not a single student ever dreamed of touching time magic again. Draco too began to find peace, his days at the manor no longer haunted by his family's past. He spent more time at Hogwarts, often joining Harry for long conversations in the courtyard about parenthood, legacy, and redemption. One evening, as the two men stood watching the sunset, Draco said quietly, "Funny, isn't it? We spent our youth fighting each other, and now our sons are the ones teaching us how to forgive." Harry smiled faintly. "They're better than we were," he said. Draco's lips curved in the smallest of smirks. "Let's hope they stay that way." In the weeks that followed, Albus began to write, at first in secret, then openly. A diary not of events but of lessons. The Journal of Two Times, he called it. A record of everything he had learned about friendship, courage, and the consequences of choice. Scorpius contributed sketches of the time turner, of the lake, of Delphi's silver eyes. And though they never intended for anyone else to read it, the act of writing seemed to seal something inside them, turning trauma into memory and fear into wisdom. One night, as they sat on the astronomy tower under a canopy of stars, Albus asked softly, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't stopped her?" Scorpius looked up at the constellations, his eyes reflecting the light of 1,000 ages. All the time, he admitted. But then, I remember what you said that night. That every choice makes a new story. And I think we chose the right one. They fell into comfortable silence. The kind that only true friends share. The kind that says everything without needing words. Far below, the lake mirrored, the stars like a second sky, and the castle seemed to hum softly with contentment. Yet somewhere in the vast expanse of time, beyond the reach of clocks or calendars, the universe recorded every moment they had lived, every heartbeat, every choice, every small act of courage, inscribing it in the infinite tapestry of what had been and what could still come. Back in London, life at number 12, Grimoire Place grew brighter too. The walls, that had once seemed heavy with ghosts, now echoed with laughter. James and Lily, Harry's younger children, filled the halls with mischief. And even Creature the old house, elf, seemed a little less grim, muttering blessings instead of curses as he tidied up. One evening, Harry found Albus sitting by the fireplace, reading from the journal of 2 times. Without a word, he sat beside his son, and together they watched the flames dance. "You've grown," Harry said quietly. "Not just taller." Albus smiled. "You, Dad." There were no more apologies left between them. Only understanding. As midnight approached, Harry rose and placed his hand on Albus's shoulder. "The world will always have darkness," he said softly. "But so long as people, like you and Scorpius, keep choosing the light, there's hope." Albus looked up, eyes reflecting the firelight. "Then we'll keep choosing." Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the faintest echo of a familiar cry. The augury, still watching, still remembering. And somewhere, beyond the reach of magic or time, a woman once lost to darkness wept in the silence of her cell, dreaming not of power, but of forgiveness. Perhaps, in another age, even she would find it. As dawn broke, once more over Hogwarts, light streaming through its windows like threads of gold, Harry stood at the edge of the grounds, gazing up at the towers with the quiet pride of a man who had lived through both prophecy and peace. The war was over. The scars had faded. And though the future remained unwritten, it shimmered with possibility. For the first time in his life, Harry Potter did not feel like a survivor of destiny. He felt like its author. And above him, the sky sang the gentle, eternal song of time, healed and whole. The sun rose over the rolling hills of Scotland, casting its golden light upon the spires of Hogwarts, painting the ancient castle in hues of warmth and rebirth. as if time itself wished to honor the peace that had finally settled upon the wizarding world. The War of Shadows, the battles of destiny, and the weight of prophecy had all at last given way to calm, and yet the echoes of what had been still whispered softly through the air, like the faint murmur of a story unwilling to be forgotten. In those quiet days, after Delphi's defeat, life had resumed its rhythm, not as it was before, but as something gentler, wiser, and whole. The great hall, once again filled with laughter, that felt untainted by fear. Students argued over Quidditch scores, rather than the legacies of their last names, and the portraits lining the walls seemed to smile more often, as if even the past itself had begun to heal. For Harry Potter, peace was both a blessing and a strange new frontier. The battles that had once defined him were over, and yet, in their absence, he found himself learning to live not as the chosen one, but simply as Harry, a father, a husband, and a man who had finally made peace with his past. He spent more time at home now, often found in the garden of number 12 Grimmauld Place, tending to small things, trimming hedges, feeding owls, and watching Ginny and the children laugh beneath the open sky. It was a life he had never thought he would have, one not built upon destiny but upon choice. Still, even in contentment, memory had its way of visiting him, not in pain, but in quiet reflection. Sometimes, as he looked into the sky, he thought of Delphi, her eyes, silver and storm, filled, her voice trembling with both fury and sorrow. And he wondered if redemption was truly beyond her reach. Hermione, now the steadfast Minister for Magic, had ensured Delphi's imprisonment was humane, guarded not by dementors but by wardens, who understood that the greatest punishment for one obsessed with time was to be left within it. Reports from Azkaban described Delphi as silent, neither defiant nor broken, spending her days staring out over the gray waves, whispering to the sea, "She's a reminder," Hermione had said when Harry last asked. That darkness is never erased. It's endured and taught from. Harry had nodded, knowing she was right. Yet even knowing that, he could not bring himself to hate Delphi. She was, in many ways, a fragment of the same pain that once haunted him. The child of war, shaped by absence and longing. At Hogwarts, Albus and Scorpius had become inseparable legends in their own right, though not for their adventures, which were kept secret by mutual oath, but for the quiet strength of their friendship. They were known as the eternal duo among their classmates. One Potter, one Malfoy, a bond that defied history. Their days were filled with normalcy, laughter in the library, long nights, studying spells, and whispered debates about whether time itself had a consciousness. Yet beneath the surface, both boys had matured beyond their years, carrying wisdom too deep for their age. One afternoon, while sitting beneath the oak tree by the Black Lake, the same tree under which they had buried the final fragment of the time Turner, Scorpius turned to Albus and said softly, "Do you ever think time forgave us?" Albus smiled faintly, his reflection rippling across the water. Maybe it didn't need to. Maybe it just wanted us to understand. The wind stirred the lake into a shimmer of light, and in that moment, the two boys felt something shift, not in the air, but in themselves. A quiet sense of closure, as if the world itself had drawn a gentle breath and moved on. The years that followed saw changes across the wizarding world. Hermione's ministry introduced new reforms that emphasized magical ethics and empathy, ensuring that the mistakes of the past, secrecy, prejudice, and power unchecked, would never be repeated. Draco Malfoy, too, found his redemption, not through grandeur, but through the quiet dignity of fatherhood. He began teaching part-time at Hogwarts, offering lectures on potion, craft, and the history of magical innovation, earning reluctant admiration from those who once whispered his name in disdain. "The sins of our fathers," he once told a group of wide-eyed students, "do not bind us. They only challenge us to be better." His words, humble yet profound, became one of the most quoted lines in Hogwarts history. Meanwhile, Harry devoted his time to mentoring young Aurors, not as their superior, but as their equal, teaching them that courage was not the absence of fear, but the strength to face it with compassion. Evil, he told them one crisp morning, doesn't return through dark wizards. It returns when good people forget what fear taught them. And so, under his guidance, the new generation of protectors grew, not as warriors, but as guardians of peace. Yet despite all this rebuilding, time had one final gift to offer. A reminder that healing is not forgetting. One evening, as spring melted into summer, Harry received an unexpected letter, delivered by a golden, feathered owl. The parchment was smooth, the handwriting elegant, unfamiliar. It read, "To Harry Potter. The world turns, as it always must. In the silence of my cell, I have learned that love and hate are the same wound, only healed differently. I was born of darkness, but I no longer wish to live there. If time ever grants me mercy, I will spend it seeking light." Harry read the letter twice, his heart heavy, but strangely at peace. He did not show it to anyone, not even Ginny, but placed it quietly in a drawer beside the photograph of his parents, whispering, "Maybe that's enough." The following morning, he took Albus to the edge of the forbidden forest, where the morning mist hung low and silver. Together they stood before the oak, where the time Turner's fragment lay buried. "What happens next?" Albus asked softly. Harry smiled, the lines around his eyes deep but kind. "Whatever we choose. That's the magic that matters." Albus knelt, brushing his hand over the moss-covered earth. And for a brief instant, he thought he saw a faint pulse of golden light, as if the forest itself remembered their story. They left it undisturbed, turning back toward the castle as the morning sun climbed higher. The world, after all, had no need for time Turner's anymore. It had learned to live in the present. That night, as the stars spread across the heavens, Hogwarts glowed like a beacon, its towers crowned in starlight. The ghosts in its halls seemed quieter, the portraits warmer, and in the soft rustle of the wind, one might almost hear a familiar whisper. A voice saying, "Al is well." And so it was. The boy who had once carried the burden of fate now walked freely beside his son, and the legacy of friendship, courage, and forgiveness shone brighter than any spell. The past had been mended, the future awaited, and the story of Harry Potter, though no longer bound by prophecy, would live on forever. Not in the turning of time, but in the hearts of those who remembered that love is the truest kind of magic. The years rolled on like pages in a storybook, and with each passing season, the echoes of the past grew softer, replaced by the laughter of new beginnings and the quiet hum of lives well lived. Hogwarts, eternal and steadfast, stood as a beacon through the ages, its walls carrying the memories of countless generations who had walked its hallowed corridors and found themselves within its magic. The scars of time had long since healed, but their lessons endured, whispered through stone and shadow, reminding all who entered that light is only meaningful when one has known the dark. On a calm autumn morning, golden leaves swept across the castle grounds, dancing in lazy spirals, before settling near the great lake where the reflection of the ancient turrets shimmered like a dream half remembered. Albus Potter stood there, now taller, older, his once uncertain gaze replaced by the quiet strength of understanding. He had grown into a young man who carried his father's kindness and his mother's courage, tempered by his own hard-won wisdom. Scorpius, Malfoy, stood beside him, no longer the anxious boy who had once feared his family's name, but a confident wizard whose laughter came easily, whose loyalty ran deep. The two had faced more than most their age could imagine, had played with time, battled legacy, and wrestled with fate itself. And yet now, in the stillness of their 20th year, they found peace, not in adventure but in the ordinary rhythm of life. Funny, isn't it? Scorpius said with a grin, tossing a pebble into the lake. How the world just keeps going. No prophecies. No dark lords. Just classes, exams, and the occasional misfired spell. Albus smiled faintly, watching the ripples fade. Maybe that's the real magic. When you don't need anything to happen. The two friends stood in silence for a while. The crisp air filled with the distant sound of students laughing, owls hooting, and the steady hum of life continuing. It was the Hogwarts they had always dreamed of. A place of learning, not of fear. Yet beneath that tranquility, both knew that the world was never without its challenges, only that they had learned how to meet them with open hearts rather than clenched fists. In those same years, Harry Potter had found his peace, not in the ministry's bustling corridors, but in the simple joys of fatherhood. His life, once defined by prophecy and war, was now measured in cups of tea, shared with Ginny, Quidditch, matches cheered from the stands, and letters from his children that spoke of laughter instead of danger. He had retired from active horror duty, choosing instead to lead the department of magical law enforcement as a mentor and reformer. Under his guidance, the ministry changed, not through decrees or power, but through compassion. Dark artifacts were no longer locked away to be forgotten. They were studied, understood, and neutralized, ensuring that ignorance would never again give darkness room to grow. Hermione, ever the visionary, continued as minister for magic, ushering in a new golden age of unity between magical and non-magical communities. Muggle borns now held high positions in the ministry, and the barriers that had once divided the wizarding world were fading into memory. Ron, still working with George at Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, had turned their shop into a kind of legend. A place where laughter was not just sold, but shared, and where children of all backgrounds could find wonder in the simplest of charms. Draco, though still reserved, had become a respected figure in magical academia, lecturing on magical theory and redemption. His calm demeanor, hiding a fierce dedication to shaping a better world for the next generation. The old rivalries were gone, replaced by the quiet bond of those who had survived and chosen forgiveness over bitterness. As for Delphi, her story had taken an unexpected turn. Years in isolation had transformed her from the vengeful child of Voldemort into something else. A seeker of redemption. Her letters to Harry, though rare, spoke not of revenge, but of reflection. She spent her days in quiet study, using her prodigious, magical intellect to help the Ministry understand temporal enchantments and prevent their misuse. Hermione once remarked that Delphi's insights had likely saved countless lives, though her name would never appear in official records. Harry never replied to her letters, but he kept each one, bound with a red ribbon, in the drawer beside his parents' photograph. Forgiveness, he had learned, did not always require words. On the day Hogwarts celebrated the centennial anniversary of the Battle of Hogwarts, the castle shimmered with life. Banners of gold and silver fluttered from every tower. The great hall glowed with enchanted candles, and portraits of those long gone seemed to watch with pride as students and families gathered to honor the legacy of courage and love had defined their world. Harry, now older, with silver in his hair, but light in his eyes, stood at the podium before a crowd that spanned generations. Beside him were Hermione, Ron, Ginny, and Draco, their faces lined not by time, but by memory. 100 years ago, Harry began, his voice steady but soft. We fought for a world that would be free, not just from darkness, but from fear. Today, we celebrate that freedom, not with wands drawn, but with hands joined. The true victory was never in defeating evil. Evil, it was in choosing to live after it. The crowd erupted into applause, but Harry's gaze fell to where Albus and Scorpius stood among the students, smiling back at him. In their eyes, he saw the future he had once only dreamed of, a future not bound by his scars, but built upon the lessons they had taught. That night, after the celebration had faded into quiet, Harry walked alone through the castle grounds. The moonlight bathed everything in silver, and the wind carried faint echoes of laughter from the great hall. He paused by the lake, the same place where it had all begun, and in a way, where it had all ended. He thought of Dumbledore, Snape, of Sirius, of all those who had guided him through darkness. Their faces seemed to shimmer in the reflection of the stars upon the water. We did it, he whispered softly, the words carried away by the night breeze. You'd be proud of them. All of them. For a brief moment, he thought he felt a hand upon his shoulder, warm and reassuring, and he smiled. The past was at peace. The present was alive. and the future was bright. As dawn broke, the castle awoke, once more, sunlight flooding through its windows, painting the halls in gold. Students hurried to breakfast. Owls swooped through the rafters, and the smell of pumpkin pasties filled the air. Life went on, as it always had, as it always would. In the distance, Harry saw Albus and Scorpius walking toward the gates, their laughter echoing across the grounds. He watched them for a moment, then turned toward the horizon, where the rising sun burned away the last traces of night. The story of Harry Potter, the boy who lived, had finally come full circle. It was no longer a tale of survival, but of renewal, of the enduring truth that love, friendship, and hope are the strongest magic of all. And, as the castle bells tolled in the morning light, heralding another day at Hogwarts, the world seemed to whisper, once more, all is well.